Good morning and welcome to today's show. Today, we are talking about protecting your family. Specifically, we will be focusing on employee and executive benefits. Stay tuned to discover insights on the benefits that might be available from your employer that you can use to protect your family. I'm Jeff Rehmeyer. I'm an attorney and president of the CGA law firm. Historically, my practice has involved business, real estate, and estate planning. These days, I am emphasizing a focus on estate planning to include planning for young adults because there's such a need. On today's show, we have Chris Rice. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Certainly. By way of short background, Chris is an executive benefits and financial services consultant with McConkey Co, Inc. Chris was born and raised in Lancaster, attended Millersville University, where he earned a BS in business administration. He then went on to earn his MBA from Penn State. Chris is a certified financial planner, as well as a CPA and a personal financial specialist. Chris has experience with individual, small business, trust, nonprofits. He's also worked in wealth management, has extensive financial planning knowledge. On a personal front, Chris is married to his wife, Lauren, and their son, Hudson, and they live in Lancaster. He is treasurer of the Manheim Township Educational Foundation. In his spare time, which Chris allegedly has after a resume like that, he enjoys golfing, hiking, boating, and spending time with family and friends. He's also a Philly sports team fan. So, Chris, again, welcome to the show. I know I gave some background, but maybe you could take a few minutes and just tell us how you got to this specific role that you're at today.
Certainly. Yeah. Thanks again, Jeff. And just first and foremost, you touched on all the personal aspects. Obviously, first and foremost, husband, father, an avid golfer. But as far as a little bit of my professional background, as you touched on a little bit, my experience spans a few different areas of accounting and finance. I started off as a CPA, working in the South Central PA area as a CPA, working mostly with individuals who own their own businesses. So doing not only their individual return, but their business returns and seeing the flow between that and the flow through and how that affected their personal finances. So preparing tax returns and compiling their financial statements, while also consulting them on their personal finances. That part kind of led me to the next chapter in my career, which was in wealth management and financial planning. I did that for about 8 or 9 years. During this time, I worked with similar clients as my time as a CPA. A lot of them were business owners. They had complex issues going on that obviously included a lot of what you do, which is the estate planning. And we also got into a lot of tax planning because that was part of my background, tax planning and as far as investments and personal finances, and then obviously retirement goals in that as well. So a big part of the planning within the wealth management was making sure that we're protecting our clients' nest eggs, as well as their family legacy. So that kind of plays into the whole protecting your family theme that we have going on here.
Excellent. So on a day-to-day basis, Chris, what does a workday look like for you?
So a typical workday would be, meeting with clients and individuals, whether they're business owners, key executives, or just individuals that need protection, and discussing their current protections, that being life, disability, and long-term care insurance that we'll get into a little bit later, and if they are adequate for their current situation as it stands now. So we're kind of doing an environmental scan of, hey, this is what you have. Does it still fit what's going on in your life now? Maybe you had these coverages when you had 3 children at home and you had 1 mortgage, but now you have 1 kid at home and you have 3 mortgages in the beach house. So like what kind of, you just want to make sure that you're reviewing that. A lot of what I do is reviewing situations to make sure that the protection is current and adequate. So it's very important to review your coverage frequently to ensure that they still meet your needs, because as we know, as I just stated, life is always changing. And you'll also find me collaborating with my colleagues at McConkey, which I'll touch on that just a little bit quickly. So for those of you who don't know, McConkey Insurance and Benefits is an insurance and benefit firm located in New York, PA, serving all of South Central PA. They've been around for over 130 years. Yeah, you're hearing that correctly. They've been around since 1890. They started as a commercial insurance company, but since then they've expanded into to include employee benefits, group benefits, your medical, dental, vision, and all that sort of type of benefits. And we also do surety bonds, personal lines, so your home auto umbrella coverage, and then where my department comes in executive benefits, that we just dig a little bit deeper into the benefits portion to cover your key employees and executives in the company. So that's kind of, that's a little bit of background on the company that I work for as well.
A little bit on a substantial company with over a century of service in South Central Pennsylvania. Prior to the show, you know that I'm a fan. E.K. McConkey is a great institution, and it has great people, including you. Fantastic resource. And again, thank you for being on here today. So one thing I wanted to highlight before I get to my next question, which was interesting, and I told you earlier that I've done about 10 or 11 of these shows. One of the things that I try to reiterate during the shows, and it's come up with regard to estate planning documentation, is the idea that you don't simply set it and forget it. You need to be mindful that it's there and then revisit it, just like coverages, because situations change. You do documents when your children are babies, they need to do one thing. When you have a child that's 18 or 20, you need to do something else. So it's a matter of awareness and being mindful of changes and doing the appropriate updates. And you specifically alluded to doing that on the benefit fronts for protective purposes. So we're aligned in that thought, and thank you for making that point.
Absolutely.
When we prep for today, you and I talked some about a number of potential benefits that are available to employees from employers. Maybe we could take a few minutes and just talk about a few. A couple that came to mind right off the bat were health FSAs and health savings accounts. And maybe you could take a minute and describe what each is and compare them for us.
Absolutely, Jeff. Yeah. So when you're talking about the health insurance plans, you obviously have your basic plan in itself, a PPO or what have you, that actually administers the coverage. But then you have these separate accounts that you can put pre-tax money away to pay for your healthcare cost, essentially. So the two that I was going to touch on, as you said, was the health FSA, health flexible spending account, and the health savings account. So sound very similar, two pretty different things. So each of them kind of allow you to contribute to an account pre-tax. So if you're getting your paycheck and you say you're paying 100% on 100% of the income, if you put 10% of that in an HSA or FSA, you're not taxed on that portion of it. So you're kind of cutting down your tax bill now and essentially paying your medical expenses tax-free with either one of these options. So that's kind of a big similarity between both of them. Mm-hmm. However, there are some differences that people should definitely be aware of. So with an HSA or health savings account, you must be enrolled in a qualified high deductible plan. So you can, I'm not going to get into depth on what that is, but you just know that you have to be enrolled in a special type of plan to even participate in a health savings account. And in the FSA, you can participate in almost any plan as long as the FSA is available through your employer and you're not also contributing to an HSA. So you can't contribute to both an HSA and a health FSA at the same time. It's another big difference. And one thing that a lot of people don't even get into and think about that much, but it's important to know that an HSA is employee owned. So you own the dollars that you're putting into it, and they're yours to take wherever you go. And an FSA is employer owned, actually. So although you're putting money in an account that you can then use for healthcare spending, it's owned by the employer, and that's kind of what makes it. I'll get into a little bit, a use it or lose it type of plan. Another difference between HSAs and FSAs is HSA you can pay for current, prior, or future year expenses. So if you put it away today, you can pay for bills that maybe you have a payment plan on a huge bill that you had 2 years ago. You can put money in HSA and pay for that now. You can also pay for current year expenses, obviously, or you can roll it over and pay for future years. So that's the other big difference with an FSA is, as I said, it's use it or lose it. You can put those dollars away. It's employer owned, but if you don't use it the year that you put it in for current year expenses, so that's the other thing with FSA, you can only pay for current medical expenses that were incurred in the current year or with an FSA. So it's literally a use it or lose it scenario. So it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult to plan that out. If you're not sure that you're going to have a certain amount of medical bills in a year, and you put in 3,000 in FSA, but you only have 1,000 in medical bills, you kind of have to find out a way to use that $2,000. So it makes it a little bit difficult on the planning side of things sometimes. So those are just some big points I wanted to make for differences between one other thing I wanted to mention about an HSA. Sorry, you can also put it on the wealth management hat here a little bit. You can use it as a long-term investment vehicle because you own the HSA. Mm-hmm. You have most, if not all, of the HSAs have investment options that essentially you can treat it as a smaller 401k to keep it in kind of simple terms. And the HSA is actually the most efficient investment account that there is because it's tax-free into the account and it's tax-free out of the account. There's no other account that can claim to be both tax-free in and tax-free out. You have like a Roth IRA where it's you pay the taxes up front when you put it in, but then you don't pay taxes on the back end. You have a traditional IRA or 401k where you get the tax write-off at the beginning and you pay the taxes at the end. In HSA, you're not paying taxes on either end. So that's what makes it the most efficient type of vehicle that exists.
Interesting, Chris. So two questions that came to my mind. One, under a health FSA, and I feel like I should know this answer, but what does FSA stand for?
It's a flexible spending account.
Okay. So as I heard you talk, I felt like I wanted a health savings account. That sounded like the better option. But really, what dictates which one may or may not be available when you look at that with your employer? Can you help me understand that?
Yeah, and this kind of plays into a trend that you're going where a lot of employers offer choices in health plans now. A lot of them offer a qualified high deductible health plan that then, of course, you can contribute to an HSA on, and then they offer a PPO type plan where then you can pair that with an FSA. So it's really situationally dependent. Mm-hmm. Typically, I don't even want to say anything specific because it's so situationally dependent on which one it is. And I would say that you should talk to your HR department. They should be helpful in helping you decide which way to go in general. And I can certainly enlighten if you want me to go into more detail than that, but it's so situationally dependent that you can't really say one way or another. But in general, the HSA is a pretty good way to go, unless you're having a significant amount of expenses because you're on a qualified high deductible health plan. But there's a lot of other things that go into it, though.
So maybe we're back to another takeaway, and this is a high-level talk we're having. So one of the takeaways for somebody looking at this is to investigate with your employer what options are available relative to the health insurance, and then to pair that appropriately with a health FSA or a health savings account, depending upon the circumstances. And some of what I'm hearing you say is there are benefits to either route. You need to investigate, apply it to your circumstances, but you want to avail yourself of those benefits and maximize them, which does protect you and your family.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really comes down to, if you're not sure, because not only is every situation different, every employer is different, every HR department's different, all your employee benefits packages are different. So It just comes down to, if you're not sure, talk to human resources, and they should be able to guide you.
Okay. How about another big item that's often available, which is retirement plans? What would you offer with regard to them?
Sure. So keeping this on kind of high level family protection theme here, for most of the people listening to this, a retirement plan is, most of us have a 401k nowadays. The days of the pensions and defined benefit plans are all but gone. They still exist for sure, but they're not nearly as prevalent as they were 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So now you're talking what they call a defined contribution plan, which is a 401k plan. So keeping with the overall theme here, the 401k is an employer-sponsored retirement plan that allows you to save money, tax deferred, now for use at a future date. Now, let me put a little caveat in that, as I touched on a little bit earlier. Another thing you want to, when it comes to 401ks, is most of them, it's definitely not all of them, most of them offer a traditional or a Roth contribution option. So in general, if you think taxes are going to be higher later for yourself, Roth is probably good now because you're paying the taxes now on it, so you don't have to pay them later. If for some reason you think that taxes are going to be lower now, I don't know there's many people that are saying that out there nowadays, but then your traditional 401k contribution is probably the best because you're getting the tax write-off now for when you think your tax bracket is going to be higher as opposed to later. That's something that you can discuss another, speak to your financial planner, or even, another thing that maybe perhaps human resources can help with. So in keeping with the theme of protecting your family, this can protect your family by, obviously accruing liquid assets that they can use in case of an emergency. Of course, the worst case scenario here would be, a family breadwinner, something unfortunate happens and they're no longer with us. So then this gives the family something, a liquid asset account that they can use to live off of. If something were to happen. So that's kind of your worst case scenario. However, even if nothing unfortunate happens, this money can still be used, obviously, for one, retirement. That's the ultimate plan, right? Retirement plan. And also, looking out even further, pass it on to future generations and protect them financially as well.
Excellent. So avail yourself of the retirement plan. Is the advice generally to maximize putting in as much as you can?
Yes, and I'm kind of a realist when it comes to that. Earlier in your career, you want to try and max it out all the time. I mean, I think it's like $20,000 is the maximum now, and then there's a catch up as well. So if you have the cash flow to do it, you should absolutely be maxing this out before you're doing any other type of retirement type savings. Obviously, you have other savings for shorter term goals. Buying a house, college, paying for weddings and all that good stuff. But when it comes to retirement, you should absolutely be maxing out your 401k before you're doing anything else. And part of that is because you want to be maxing out the employer match. So oftentimes, the more you put in, the more they match. Sometimes it's a flat amount that they match anyway, but you always want to be maxing out the 401k first. Absolutely.
So it's the most favorable retirement investment you can make personally, part one. In part two, you should take a look at your employer's plan, because employers will often contribute to your 401k, but there might be different parameters, and you don't want to do anything that doesn't allow you to maximize that employer contribution.
Correct.
Sooner is better, because that means it spends more time in the market and is in there longer until you need to draw it out, which means it's a bigger number.
Yeah, and just as a caveat, in my years as a financial planner, the people that were super comfortable were the ones that started aggressively saving in their 20s and gave that money years and years to compound. So it definitely does work.
And then that retirement age creeps up on you quicker than you know.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So one other benefit that you said you might speak about is voluntary benefits.
So I'll just touch on this a little bit. So essentially, for those that don't know, the term voluntary benefits are benefits that are offered as part of your employer benefit package. So to go along with your, what most people think of that as a healthcare plan. I mean, it obviously involves a lot more than that. Like healthcare, vision, employee assistance, and your retirement plan is even really part of your overall employer benefit package. But a part of that is what they call voluntary benefits. And really what voluntary benefits are is your employer offers them as part of the package, but you have the option on whether you want to participate in them or not. A couple big ones that are in this kind of realm are your additional disability, additional life voluntary benefits. So a lot of employers, they're usually most of the time these are paid by the employee, because obviously if you have the option to participate in them, then it's probably going to be coming out of the employee's pocket. So where these types of benefits, a particular situation where they come in handy, is when someone is otherwise uninsurable, especially in the life and disability insurance basis, because a lot of these voluntary benefits are issued on what they call a GSI, or guaranteed standard issue basis. So there's no underwriting involved in these, and to a certain extent, you can't go out and get $2 million in coverage through a voluntary benefit and not have any underwriting. They're usually capped. But the point is, if somebody's uninsurable or not necessarily uninsurable, but it's just really expensive for them to obtain any type of life or disability insurance, this is when you definitely want to think about maxing out your voluntary benefits, because there's usually, and again, there's caveats and specific situations as well, but I'm comfortable saying usually there's a guaranteed standard issue element to it that you don't have to be underwritten. In other words, nobody's going to pull your medical records and see that maybe you have a debilitating condition. You're not going to have to do lab work, blood work, or have medical exams. So really, it's extremely beneficial to someone that might be otherwise uninsurable.
Excellent. So again, this creates a different route to get protections for your family, especially if you have some unique circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is something that you can, is all part of your kind of overall benefits package, but it's definitely something to consider, especially like, as I said, if you're otherwise uninsurable, you definitely want to look into these voluntary benefits and make sure you're maximizing them.
Okay. Yeah. And we had talked previously, there are a number of benefits that employers make available. We're not going to get into all of them, but they can include things like employee assistance programs or wellness programs. So one message for anybody is to just thoroughly investigate what your employer offers. Employers are incentivized to support you, to support your health, and create opportunities for that. It's better for everyone. So investigate, consider your circumstances, and maximize those benefits to protect yourself and your family. So let's dive a little deeper on the sweet spot topics here. You were going to talk some about executive benefits today, and that included the individual life insurance, individual disability insurance, and long-term care policies. So what can you tell us about those, Chris?
Sure. So I'll just spend a little bit of time on each of these topics. Obviously, everybody knows what life insurance is. So through the lens of protecting your family, there's nothing more obvious than making sure that you have adequate life coverage in case an unfortunate event happens and puts them in a bad spot. So the most important things to consider when looking at life insurance is, one, do I have enough given my current situation? So between your employer provided coverage, as I said, so just to add on to that, sometimes employers actually will pay for a part of your coverage, life insurance coverage as well. So looking at your overall protection package, part of your employer provided coverage and your own personal coverage, whether that's voluntary through your employer, you go out to the market and get it yourself. It's important. A general rule of thumb for protection is 10 times salary, but this can vary based on amount of debt, number of children, business interests that you might need to be bought of or buy someone else out of. So there's a lot of different scenarios that can affect this. That's why it's important to review the coverages, and not only review them yourself, but it's important to get probably a professional involved that fully understands the coverages and how they work, not only now, but how they might project to work into the future. Because a lot of times they're not so, black and white in their terms and conditions. So it's something that you definitely want to talk to a professional about if you are not sure. So we recommend you review your coverages every 5 years or so to make sure they're still adequate, or maybe you have too much. And it's also possible you have too much protection now. You might want to shift it to a different type of protection. A lot of times I'll see, people were planning to have a lot of life insurance while they had children and a lot of debt, and as they get closer to retirement age and they're empty nesters, then they got to start thinking, well, maybe we don't need life insurance anymore. Maybe we need to think about protecting our nest egg even further. So then that has me jump into the long-term care policies now. So I'll just explain a little bit on these and how they work, and maybe some misconceptions surrounding them that we tend to hear sometimes. So for long-term care coverage, it's often overlooked, but many people feel that it is either too costly or too complicated, or I don't need it. I'm going to go into a facility. I want to need long-term care. I mean, the fact of the matter is most people do. I mean, when you get over 65, it's the majority of people need some sort of care. So it's a common misconception that it's not needed or it's too costly. Not only can you, as far as the too costly part, you're not only can you apply for different amounts of coverage, you don't have to plan to pay, like when you're looking into retirement and you're saying now instead of protecting my cash flow when I'm working, I want to protect my nest egg from these large medical bills that might come from a long-term care stay. So not only maybe you don't need to cover 100% of that cost, but at least offsetting part of it with long-term care insurance makes a lot of sense. So there's different types of policies available now than maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So it's been a while since you investigated it. I recommend going back into the market if you're still interested and looking at the various options that are available now, because there's a lot more efficient and feasible options now. So some people may be familiar with what we call traditional life insurance policies. This goes back to the use it or lose it theme. This is similar to a term life insurance where you sign up to get coverage for 20 years, and if you don't use it in that 20 years, you lose it, and then it's done. You essentially just put that money in that pot, and it didn't do anything. So the traditional long-term care policies that were the only game in town for a while are not. So now there's newer types of policies that are called hybrid policies. So these policies have a life insurance element as well as a return of premium element. So the purpose of those is, hey, if you don't use it for long-term care, you at least have some life insurance that you can hold on to and have a benefit at some point. Or you also have a return of premium option that if you don't use it and you decide, hey, I'm done paying this, you can literally get your premiums back if you just want to stop payments. So there's kind of two options that make it completely not a use it or lose it scenario like the traditional long-term care policies used to be. So yeah, the premiums and the other thing with the hybrid policies, the new is both the premium or the payment you're putting into the policy and the benefits, the dollar amount of benefits that you get if you go on a long-term care claim are guaranteed on the hybrid policies, where with the old traditional policies, there was nothing guaranteed about them. They could raise or lower the premiums, they could raise or lower the benefits, which kind of made it a difficult thing to plan for. You can't really budget for these moving targets. But now both of those items are guaranteed in the newer hybrid policies.
Wow. So
I'll take a pause there, and Jeff, if you have any questions.
That was a lot. So if you initially started on the life insurance suggesting that while you're working and depending upon your expenses, such as mortgages or children, you want to get insurance in place, ideally 10 times salary was that ballpark figure. But
correct.
Then segue to the idea that once your children are grown, you get some of those debts behind you and you transform from that earning phase to the phase where you have retirement monies and you have that nest egg protecting it. And that's when you suggested a long-term policy can help with that, because that would provide support and financial resources for you if you in fact needed long-term care. And that goes to the hybrid, which was new to me, which is you pay into the policy. It can provide you, I think I heard you say, potentially a guaranteed amount of long-term care. But if you don't need the long-term care, rather than all that money just being gone, and you would have had the benefit of the protection, but still it's gone, there's an opportunity for some level of return of premium or some level of life insurance benefit. So ultimately, if you pay in, you get something back. Is that what?
That's correct. That is the huge benefit to the hybrid policies that a lot of people aren't even aware of exist. A lot of people are so stuck on the older traditional policies that are still around, but the use it or lose it type of policies where you're kind of rolling the dice as to whether you're going to need it or not. So that's an enormous benefit of the newer hybrid policies.
That's fantastic. So again, we're back to investigate options, investigate them based on your current life status, because it might be different when you're 40 versus you're 50 versus 60. And then you look what you get in place to protect yourself and protect your family. Okay.
Correct.
Did you want to talk any at all about the disability insurance?
Let me just, I know we're running over a little bit. So with the disability, you just want to make sure really quick that a lot of times you have employer disability coverage, employer provided disability coverage. All that I can say is make sure that that's sufficient. A lot of times there's a percentage of income cap. So disability insurance, if you hurt yourself, you get seriously ill, this will essentially be paycheck protection is what it comes down to. It's going to replace your paycheck. So the employer provided coverage, make sure it's adequate. Talk to your HR department and say, how is this really going to replace my income if something happened to me? A lot of times there's a percentage cap, as I said. So let's just say it's 60%. Say you make 100,000, it's a 60% replacement. If you go on claim for a long time, you're only getting $60,000. And a lot of times that's also taxed, or maybe you're only really getting net $50,000 or so. So you're cutting your income in half when you might not even realize that. So it's really important to figure out what that coverage is, because if it's not adequate, there's options to have additional coverage in place that will make it more of a full paycheck replacement type of policy. So that's really just the one takeaway I want everybody to have on the disability is make sure it's adequate, because a lot of people kind of set it and forget it, as we said, with the employer provided disability coverage, not realizing that until it's too late, when they need it, that it's only going to replace a portion of their income.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that tip, Chris.
Sure.
So as we near the conclusion of today's show, are there any trends that you're seeing in terms of executive employee benefits that you wanted to highlight for anybody watching today? Anything? And I felt like the hybrid, I don't know that I'd call it a trend, but to me, that was an exciting development. But any trends that you see underway right now?
Oh, that's definitely a trend, and the hybrid policies are definitely trending in the long-term care market. But as far as a trend in general, what we're seeing at McConkey in our employee benefits division is a big focus on recruitment and retention, right? I don't know if you heard, but there's kind of a labor shortage out there. So, you got to do everything you can to get the good people and keep them. And employer benefit packages are a huge part of that. So we're seeing more of that than ever. Say, hey, how can we, get the people we need in, or how do we get our key employees to stay around? We're hearing that now more than ever, because, there people are getting, off, you're getting offered to leave, or, there's just various different things, or it's just hard to get people in general. So it's been a huge topic and a huge trend for the foreseeable future to use employer benefits as part of an attractive package to keep, recruit and retain employees to your company. That's probably the number one thing. The other thing, kind of in general, employer benefits is leveraging technology is going to be huge in terms of healthcare and telemedicine. For anybody that hasn't had a telemedicine visit yet, it's extremely efficient. I mean, maybe some people won't like it because, you want to go and see somebody in person, but I can tell you from personal experience, and a bunch of other people can too, that if you just have, a cut, a scrape, a cold, something that you would usually go to the doctor for, and have to go in and pay a copay and spend time and make an appointment. Usually with telemedicine, you can get a same day appointment, and it's really efficient. You're talking about a 5-minute in and out visit on your phone. You can get, prescription whenever you need, a diagnosis, and it's really efficient. It's usually at little or no cost to the employee. If you use telemedicine. Now it obviously depends on your benefit package, but there's a few options out there that can provide telemedicine at a lot lower cost than going in person. So that's another huge trend in the employee benefits. So those are the kind of the two.
Great, Chris. So the first message I heard was, if you're an employer, investigate these options because they can be used to entice and retain employees. And conversely, if you're the employee looking at your options, it's not simply a matter of salary or vacation, but you really want to dive into those benefit options to see what your employer makes available to keep you there, to protect you, and to protect your family. And then the technology piece on telehealth is fantastic. I know that I've tried it. My wife has tried it, and you're correct. It is much more efficient. And I don't want to make any jokes about waiting rooms at the doctor's office, but that telehealth is almost so seamless. It's very enjoyable. So great on that. All right. As we conclude, Chris, are there any other tips that you'd like to offer before we finish up? And I asked that just to give you a shot, but I've counted numerous tips you provided throughout this session. So anything else that comes to mind you want to share?
So really just kind of in closing, review your coverages, whether it's with your financial advisor, HR department, your insurance benefits advisor. Just look at them and try to understand them. There's people out there that will help you do it if you don't want to take the time to do it yourself. But it's important that you know and understand what your coverages are, because a lot of times people don't understand what their coverage are until they need them. You wouldn't believe how often that's the case. And then, everyone's situation is different. So it's important to consult with your experts in your specific situation to know the best path for you and the best coverages for you. So kind of in closing, as a closing statement, know your needs, review your needs, and address your needs adequately by covering them by various different types of coverages. So that's really what it comes down to. Know them, and you can get help doing that. Know them and understand them, review them frequently, and then address them if they're not adequate.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that recap. That's one of my favorite questions, and you took it to do a great summary of today's show. So I would thank you again for being with us, Chris. Your resume, your successes to date are extraordinary. The information you provided was exemplary. I know prepping for today, you were very diligent about being prepared. So I would thank you for that. You're certainly a credit to EK McConkey, its clients, and our community here in South Central Pennsylvania. So thank you again, Chris, and we'll conclude this show.
Thanks again, Jeff. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.